Alright, my dear students, so let's get quickly started with Hibernate class number 2. What we had learned so far is how do we create the Hibernate configuration by accessing the source code, right? There are three things that we should remember: that the dialect is used to convert the source code, right? A written source code to the transact SQL query, and every database uses its own dialect, its own, we can say, query language. And the driver is used to get connected, or rather to communicate, or to help in getting or we can say to communicate with or to communicate between, or to be a helping agent or helping agent in order to communicate between the Java side and the server side, which is the SQL server side or SQL server side or MySQL server side, right? So it's a communication agent between this database and your Java. And this is the URL. Actually, URL means the locator, right? Uniform resource locator, wherein the database is found. So database will be found, right, when you get connected to the port 3306, and the database name is Hibernate test. We haven't set any database username and password. So in order, if we want to set any database username and password, I'll go to Hibernate test, select the database, go to privilege, right? I can see the root has a privilege right here. Okay, you can clearly see. If you want to add an account, any specific account, for example, I say my Hibernate user. It's the username, and the host that it's going to be specific to is localhost, and the password is going to be password @123.4. So as I repeat, the password is going to be password 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 @1234. And it is going to require the native MySQL authentication. What are the privileges that you're going to grant to the user? Now, if you want the user not to delete anything but to select, insert, update, right? So you can select any proper thing. So I say I want the user to select, insert, update, but not to delete. So this can also happen, right? Or not upload files. And what structure do you allow? I allow everything. Let's allow this user everything for the sake. Okay, but yeah, you can certainly prohibit the user. Now what I do now, I'll have to edit the username here. The username is my Hibernate test user, and the password is going to be, the password property is going to be what was password @1234. Now we will still get connected to the same database. Let's go quickly and start the project. And since we know we'll be connected to the same database, so there's not going to be any error. The only difference that we will be having this time is that we have a specific username and a specific password to get connected to this database Hibernate test. And this user that we are using has specific privileges that we have granted them. Now you can see the privileges, and these are the privileges that we have granted the current user, whose password is password @1234. Do you want to show this SQL? Yeah, I will show you how to see this show SQL in a moment. The moment our project starts, because we haven't seen practical of this. And HBM2DLL auto update, yes, since the table has already been created, I don't want to recreate the table, right? And the mapping class is my persistence is the package name, and users is my model, which has been marked as an entity, right? And it has an ID attribute as well. Okay, now let's see, after starting the project, how does the project look like, and is the project going to perform the same thing, right? And second thing, get rid of all what we have been doing, or get rid of hard-coded text. Whatever we have been hard-coding has to be removed first. Okay, let's go to test. not execute the statement. So we'll have to see why we are not able to execute the statement is because of the following reasons. All right, reason number 2, ID is already there, so I'll go with ID number 3, and for example I will go with Samir AHMAD. I'm registering a new student and it has a username SAMEERAHMAD, and the password will be password. So I'll save this, and now let us rerun or refresh the page and see whether the database has been updated or not. Yeah, data inserted successfully. So now I'll go and check my database, which is Hibernate test, maybe users. Yeah, now you can see Imran, Fahim and Samir, all 3 have been inserted into the database. And now because we are using different credentials this time, so for example if I don't supply any password like we didn't supply yesterday because we were using root for this, but now it has a specific username. So what I do here is just get rid of the password and see that we are going to get an error that there is an exception which is Java database connection, which is JDBC connection exception error calling driver connect, that you're not able to connect because you are not providing any password. Now if I provide the old username root, because root also has privilege to access this particular database here. Alright, and let's execute it and run it once again. Could not execute statement is coming because we have to update the ID, right? But now we will have this specific username and password. Alright, let's register someone else right here. So let's register Arif Ahmed, and we'll say ARIFAHMAD, Arif Ahmed. Alright, so let's refresh it and see whether the data has been inserted into the database or not. Refresh, could not execute the statement, and the reason for not executing the statement is that you have to update an ID. ID 3 already exists, so we'll go with ID 4 and refresh. After refreshing, you'll easily find that the data has been inserted successfully, right? And if you go and check the database, right, so data has been inserted successfully, right? And let's go ahead and try and do some more things with the Hibernate. Right, and what we are doing right here is we are hard coding this session. Right, you can clearly see that you cannot go and create the session factory again and again and again. What we can do is create it once and then use it anywhere, everywhere you want to use it. So for that, I will do one thing. I will go to my test package. I'll go to my package which is persistence. Okay, and let's try and make few more changes to the project here. I will make a new package model and I'll drag and drop the users model to the model package with refactoring, so it's going to refactor all, and I'll go to my persistence and create a new class in persistence. So I'll say this is called as DB context. So this will be called as DB context, and this DB context will certainly have a function to get connected right here to the database, right? So I will take this session factory and okay, this is the code that we only require, right? And I will make 2 functions rather. Okay, so I'll make 2 functions right here. I will say public static, right, and the type of the function is going to be let's say about a session, and it is going to be an Hibernate session, right? And I'll say session, and it is not going to accept any parameter at all, and the name of the function is going to be connect, right? And this is my connect function. And what I do inside this connect function, I'll go ahead and make an object of session factory, right, is equal to session factory, right, configure.build session factory, and I'll go with session is equal to session factory dot open session, and I will say return the opened session, the session that you have opened now, return it back to the connect function. Now that's it. Alright, so since we have been able to return the session back to this static function, so I'll make another function, public static. So I will make close, and this is going to accept one parameter, that is session SN. Means which session do you want to close, alright, and the name of the session that you're going to close, public static, and this return type of the function is going to be void, and I'll say s dot close. Alright, so this session is going to get closed right here. So now what I am going to do, I will try, right, and catch an exception. Alright, so I will try and catch Hibernate exception E here. Right, and I can say throw new exception E. And what I do here, return null. And in this case, once you're throwing the exception, you will return null. All else what you can do, make a variable public static message. So I'll initialize it with nothing. So I'll make this, so I'll have to say static only because everything is public. And instead of throwing the exception, I'll say message dot, or message is equivalent to e dot get. E is an exception, so I'll say e dot get message and return null. Right, so this is done, and if everything goes fine, so I will say message, which is in this class, is equivalent to connected. Right, so now my connect file is ready. So this is my db context file and my connect is ready. And what else is ready? My public static void close is ready, so that I can close the connection. So this is the file that we are going to call again and again. Why have I made this static? Because static instances are basically, you don't if you call the function connect for more than once or twice, right? Because you'll have to call it in almost every page. So you don't want to create an instance of the class again and again and again, because static variables and functions use the old instance already created throughout the application. So that's why I'm going to use the same instance rather than creating a new instance. So that's why it's static, and I don't have to create an object of the class, right? So what I do right here, so I will simply go ahead and at the beginning, I will say session, or I can say private session, right, is equivalent to, or I will not make it inside a function, rather I will make it a global variable inside the class. Yeah, it is a global variable, so I will say db, so I'll easily say db context dot connect, right? Okay, so now that the session is available, so I will be using the same session here again. So I'll be using the same session again and again and again. Now you can clearly see that my job is done, right? So I'm using the old session, right? I'm getting the connection, right? And now instead of closing it here, right, what I do in finally, so I will say db context dot close, and I will pass the same session. So let's see whether this behaves in the same manner or it behaves differently. So I'll go with ID number 5, and ID number 5 is going to be a new student. Let me have Uzair Shafi, and I will give it a username UZAIRSHAFI, Uzair Shafi, and the password is password. Okay, let me refresh. We have no pointer exception. I don't know where is this exception coming from, right? So because make it final, so I don't mind making this final as well. And my DB context is here, so we still have null pointer exception. Let me see what went wrong. What are the packages imported? Hibernate. Okay, good. So this is public static session connect. So I will go ahead, we'll say session factory is equal to session factory dot new configuration dot config. Session is equal to session factory dot open session, right, and show connected and return the same session. So this connect function is of type session, has an open session, and we close. So there should not be any problem at all, right? And let me see session dot begin transaction, session dot save user, session dot get transaction dot commit, and data inserted successfully. And yeah, I suppose what is null pointer exception here then? Maybe we are initializing it here. Let me initialize the session here, so I can say session is session is equal to db context dot connect. So it returns the open session, so it's one and the same thing. Inside the function but outside the try block. Fine then, so it should work fine now. Okay. So we still have a null pointer exception. I don't know what's causing this null pointer exception. Let me just restore what we had already done. Okay, we still have null pointer exception. So the null pointer exception is not because of this, right? And the null pointer exception is because of something else. Because user class was moved from model dot. It was earlier it was persistence dot users. Now it's model dot user. So it should not have anything. Okay, let me just. No, I don't want. Okay. So now brought Hibernate here, complete old configuration restored. Okay, persistence.user declared in Hibernate. Okay. So the null pointer exception is coming because we'll have to change it here. Right? It's not persistence.users, but it is model.users. Because we changed it, right? We changed the package here. We moved users from persistence to the model, so that's why the error was here. Yeah, could not execute the statement. Now we are actually done. Let me get rid of this session factory right here. No, not there, but here. Let me get rid of this session factory because we are getting this from the class. And let me make a session is equivalent to db context dot connect, and that's it. Alright, so let me execute the statement. We should get could not execute the statement. That means everything is fine. Yeah, everything is working fine. And instead of session.close, I will say db context dot close the current session. So now this is done. Alright, so everything is done now. Great. So let me go ahead and execute it. Fine. Now everything is working absolutely fine. So now we've seen this db context. Right. So what are we going to do now? Let us go and make a new JSP page. Call this register. We have this JSP, which is register.jsp page ready. I will just say register page, and I will just go and form a table here, and I call this cell SPACING5 and cell padding is also 5, and let me open a table row and go with the table division. Keep it blank, and let me go with another division here. Keep it blank as well. Why blank? So I'll say sign up. Let me open another. Let me open another table row here, and let me go ahead with input type text. Name is equivalent to txt. input type text, name is equal to txt f name. All right, so I'll just choose it here and say enter your first name. Right, so it's as good as anything. So let me copy first name, and then we have last name, then we have username, then we have password, then we have confirm password. What else do we have? Maybe a button at the end of the day. Enter your first name, enter your last name. So I call this as txtlastname and txtuserName. So enter your userName. So I'll say enter your username, and I will say enter your, or not enter username. So I'll say create a new password, and I call this as txt password. And here what I do, confirm the password. I'll say confirm password, so txtc password means confirm password, and I'll just keep it empty. Do we have anything else? So just let me take a look at the database. First name, last name, password, and username. So first name, last name, password, and username is what we have done. And I'll go with input type, submit, and the value, instead of name, I'll give it a value. Value is equal to register, register. Let me refresh, and let me go to register.jsp. Register.jsp. It should work fine. Now everything is working fine, so I'll just add up h3 right here. Okay, I'll say h3, right, and that's it. So sign up, so we can do this now, right? So we require a form. I don't have to tell you, right? You know this. So I'll say form action. I'll keep the action as self action. I'll submit the form to the self page, and I'll say the form method is equal to post, and that particular thing is done. And I'll just close the form and keep everything inside a form. Once I keep everything inside a form, I'm able to submit the form back to the server. So let me go here on top and open scriptlets. You know scriptlets, right? I don't have to tell you what scriptlets are. And let me go and go with a new Java class known as accounts controller. So this is going to be a new Java class, accounts controller, but I am going to take it inside a new Java package, controller controller. So accounts controller will go in the package controller, right? So it has every single thing now, right? So let us make private boolean is valid. So I'll go with is valid, and I'm going to accept the complete object right here, which is the object of my entity users. I'll have to import model.users. I'll import model. Another function, private boolean is we can say register user, and it is going to accept an object of user. So let me go ahead immediately and create a constructor. So I'll say insert code, and the code is going to be constructor. So I have inserted a constructor right here, and what I do, I will make a session right here, and this session is going to be available throughout the class as a session is equal to null. So I initialize this session with null, but as soon as I create an object of the accounts controller, what is going to happen? The zero parameter constructor is going to be called automatically when you create an instance of this accounts controller class. So I will say the session here. So this session, so I'll say this, or rather create it private. So encapsulation is important. So I'll say this dot session is equal to db context. Now you know this, db context dot connect. Now you have a live session which is available throughout the class. So you can use this session anywhere in the class and it's going to be very easy. Now what are you going to do here in this register? Alright, so you can say this dot session dot, right, so you can say begin transaction, and you can say this dot session dot, right, save. What do you want to save? The complete object user, right? And you can say this dot session dot get transaction dot commit. Right, you're committing the transaction right here, and what you can do is use try and catch blocks. You can use try and catch block. So I'll catch the exception right here. So in order, if there is any exception, let me go to users, and now we have a problem here because we want to exchange messages. So I will make a private string message. So I've made a member variable known as message so that we can share user defined error message and guide the user through. I'll create getters and setters of the same, but we have a problem. Do you want this thing to be mapped with your database? I repeat, do you want message also? Because message is only used for communications. And the second thing that I'll have to make here, so I'll make private string C password, which is confirm password. Do you want this thing to be mapped with the database? Do you want message to go to the database, or do you want message to go to the database, and do you want a retype password, which is the confirm password, to go to the database? You'll say no. The answer is simply no. I do not want these two things to be in the database. But why? What is the purpose? Why should I have them in the database? No, you need not to have them in the database. And how do you prevent your entity, which is the class users, how do you prevent users class entity from mapping the confirm password and the message, right? So I don't want to map confirm password and map C password and message. I don't want to create a database table attribute of the same. So I'll use transient, right? So I'm using transient here. So what this attribute or what this annotation transient does, it makes it right invisible for the database. That means there is not going to be any database column created with the name message and C password. It will be only for the model purpose, right? Not for the persistence. So we are just, by typing transient, we are taking them away from persistence. Right then, if there is any exception, right, what you got to do, I will say if there's an exception, please return false, number one. But I need to see that exception first. So I will say user dot set message e dot get message. Now I'm filling up the user object and passing the exception message to the user. And there is no exception at all, right? So what you do, if there is no exception, I will say nothing but return true. That's it, return true. So the job here is done, right? And what are you going to do finally, right? So I will say finally, right? So close down the session, okay? So I will say db context. I've called db context directly, and I will say close the session. So which is this dot session, the class session. All right, so everything is done. So my register class is now fine. Begin the transaction, save the user, commit the transaction. That's it. So now you don't have to write query insert into database values. No, you don't have to write anything like that. And isValid is going to check if, what if user dot get username is dot equals empty, or we can say if it is not equivalent to empty, right? And or we can say what are the fields that are very important for you. So I will say user dot get fname is not equivalent to empty, and user dot get username is not equivalent to empty, and user dot get c confirm password is important dot equals empty. If these are the fields, if they are not empty, username, first name and password, if they are not empty, then do this. What? Return true. If they are empty, else we can say return false, right? So the validate function is also doing its job, but before returning true, I will say, hey, wait a second, if user.get password dot equals, right, user.get confirm password. If they are equal, you can say return true, right? But if they are not, what do you say? Return false. But wait a second, what is the message do you want to pass? I will say user.set message, fill in all the start fields, right? And if the password and confirm password do not match, I will say user.set message, right? So we'll say password and confirm passwords do not so I'll say mismatch, or they do not match, whatever you want, right? So now you can clearly see return true, else return false, and it is a nested if and else. All right, so okay, that's fine. Valid is doing good, right? And register is also doing good, and I will make a function public now that I am going to call from outside. It's encapsulation, so I will say public void save. This is the function that I'm going to call. It's going to accept user, and what I do here, I'll say if this dot is valid, if this is the valid function, then do this. What? If this dot register, if register also returns true, then do this. What do you want if everything goes fine? User dot set message, right? User dot get f name, right? And again say plus concatenate was registered. That's it. Fine. So class is now absolutely ready. Now what you do, go and call save, and the things are done. So I can make an object, so I can say counts controller AC equals new accounts controller. So the moment you make an object of accounts controller, constructor is called and the database is connected. So I can say users users. So I can say users, user is equivalent to new user. So I can say user dot set message, sorry, user dot set f name. First you have to do this. I can say request dot get parameter, which is txt f name. Alright, so first name, last name, username, password, retype password. So I'll say set name, set username, set password, set c password, first name, last name, txt user, and then f name. After that we have txt l name, right? And then we have txt username, and then we have txt password, right? And then at the end of the day we have txt c password, right? Now what do you want to do this here? So you can simply say accounts controller dot save user, and that's it. And where do you want to display the error message, right? You have to display it. I'll go ahead here and I will open expressions. You know that what expressions are. I will say user dot get. Okay, I have to make the object of user. Object of user is already here, right? So what is the problem? I'll just give it a space, and I'll say user dot get message, and that too I will say style color red, so that I display the error message in red color. So let's go and do this. refreshing the page is taking a while, so maybe okay. Fill in all the start field. We haven't mentioned the start fields. I will mention txt first name as required. I will mention txt username as required, and password is required too. Okay, let's do this. Fill in all the start fields, right? So I'll have to fill all the start fields, right? No space. Why do I have space here? Okay, now if I load this, if I just do click on the register, because HTTP post will happen, right? Whenever you click register, what is going to happen? You can clearly see post is going to run, but on get you will get an error, right? You can see you're getting a null pointer exception on get. Why? Because you're trying to get request.get parameter txtfname txtlname, but once you load the application for the first time, on get you'll not be able to find txtfname, lname, and whatever is inside this form. You may not be able to find them. Why? Because you'll find them only on post. So what I do right here, I'll carry on. I'll say if request dot get method dot equals post. Only when the request method is equivalent to post, save the user. That means this piece of code will not run on get now. This piece of code is going to run on post. Now let's see. You're getting null. Why are you getting null? So I'll go to my users, because now you're loading this int. You're loading the message right here. Okay, and we have mentioned, or we have marked this as transient. Transient means do not map this with database. So I'll go to the constructor rather, or I can say message is equal to this, so that we don't get null. Okay, now we'll not get null. Refresh and let's see the result now. No, we're not getting it. This is get and this is post. Fill in all the start fields. So I will fill Fahim Khan, Fahimkhan, right? Password pass and confirm password pass. So password and confirm passwords, they do not match. So I'll just match them. PASS pass and PASS pass. So I'll say register. Fahim was registered. So now we are getting Fahim was registered. I'll go and browse, and now I'm getting 0, and I'm getting null in the last name, right? You can clearly see here that we're getting null in the last name. So I don't know why are we getting null in the last name. So we'll have to go and check register.jsp. Okay, user dot set lname request dot get parameter txt lname. So we'll have to see whether txt lname actually exists or not. So we don't have txt lname. Yeah, we have txt last name lname. My mistake, spelling mistake. I will refresh the page. Okay, let's go back to register.jsp, and we have certain kind of an error right here. Txt lname, no error, so everything is working absolutely fine. Let's try and register, fill in all the fields. So I will just go with Fahim again and Khan and try and register the same user. We know we have a problem here that we're trying to register the same user again and again. Could not execute the statement. Yeah, we will get could not execute the statement because the ID 0 is also now there. It already exists. What time is it? Alright, we still have good amount of time. So now what we are going to do, we know that whenever we deal with database operations, right, this ID attribute is auto increment, right? We mark this as an auto increment ID attribute, so that whenever a new user comes, right, so the ID is given automatically, right? So that's what we have to actually deal with, whether the new user is getting the ID, right, or we can say it's getting the ID automatically or not. Now, how do you generate automatic ID? So that is what the question remains. How do you generate? I can do one thing right here. I'll go back to my class users, and I'll go to the ID column right here. Right, this is the primary key. This is an ID, but automatically generate the value. So I'll use @ of generated value. Right, so I'll say @ of generated value, and what is the strategy? So I will use strategy is equivalent to generation type dot auto. I want my fields to be automatically generated. I want all the fields and attributes, or we can say I want this ID to be automatically generated. If the user number 1 gets 1, second will get 2, and so on and so forth. And let me refresh and remark it. Just a moment. Alright, so automatically generate the values. Let's try and create the database, right? Let's try and recreate it. So I will mention HBM2DLL as create. So we're doing it in a much better way now. Now the moment I say create, so it will be creating a new database, but not on get, but on post. Right, so let's execute it from the beginning now, because the database table will be recreated. Old table will be dropped and new table will be, of course, created. Okay, let me now write Fahim Khan. I'm not giving ID this time, right? You can clearly see, right? ID is auto generated and I am nowhere passing an ID right here. Okay, if I go to register.jsp, and you can see that I'm no longer passing. I'm passing first name, last name, username, password, and confirm password. So I'm not passing ID here. So I'll say username. I'll just change password as well. Why is password input type text? So I'll say input type password. Okay, both are now passwords. So I'll just refresh again. Okay, now because every time you refresh, you have to change create to update now. I will change it as soon as I enter the first value, right? I'll go to my Hibernate configuration file and I'll change this create to update as soon as the first record has been inserted. Okay, we're getting could not execute the statement. Let it refresh first because it's going to create a new table as soon as you enter the page. So let me just wait a second. What went wrong? Something went wrong here. No, everything is fine. Nothing is wrong. Input type password, input type password, input type submit. Yeah, no, nothing wrong. Now, why is it taking hell amount of time? It's taking a lot of time now, isn't it? Okay, let me finish and let me restart it. Let me see what is happening with the table users. Does it exist? Or it does not exist at all? Some kind of a problem with database as well. I suppose database connection has not been closed. Have we called close the connection? No, that is the problem. But we have called, yeah. Yeah, dbcontext.close this dot session. We're calling session close as well. Yeah, okay, fine. Finally block, we're calling it. And yeah, we're not doing it here. If there's an exception, right, what you do, I can say this dot session dot get transaction dot rollback. If there's an error, please roll back the transaction. So that's what we forgot. Right, so fine, resubmission. Go to Hibernate test. I'll have to stop the database because database connection is open, so I'll stop it. And I'm bound to stop it because of some irresponsive operations, right? So, okay, now find null pointer exception. I will start the database once again. Go to the database, Hibernate test table. So users is here. Yeah, it's not been dropped as of now, but we will just go and start it again. Alright, so now enter your first name, enter your last name and whatnot. So I'll enter first name, last name, username, pass as a password. Register Fahim was registered successfully. Now if I go and use the table users, again you can see that it's been dropped. But I didn't give it 1, it's automatically given 1. Now I will do one thing. I'll go to my Hibernate.cfg and immediately change it to update. Right after I immediately change this to update, right, let's see what happens. Alright, so let me try and register second user, Naveed, whatever. So I'll say Khan. So Naveed is the username and password is password and password is password. I click register, Naveed was registered. And if I go and click and check the database yet again, I see, right, Fahim has been registered twice. It was my mistake, but yeah, you can see Naveed is automatically getting ID number 3. Now let's try and register Basit, Shafi, whatever. So I will say Basit is the username and password is password. Password is password. I click on registered. Basit was registered. Now if I go and check the database, it's getting 4 automatically, and this is what an annotation can do. This is what it does. We're saying it's an ID attribute. Entity requires one attribute, that's an ID attribute, and generated value strategy is going to be generation type dot auto. You automatically generate this. I'm not going to supply this ID. You automatically generate this. And second thing, that I don't want this to be mapped. You can clearly see the database was created once again, but it did not create 2 attributes, message and C password. You can see were nowhere created because they're being marked as transient, that these are being transient. There's not going to be any link between these two with the persistence or with the object relational mapping. So they're out of object relational mapping, right? So this is what your class is today, and this is it for today. I suppose we've already been 46 minutes, close to 50 minutes. I wish you good luck and do practice very hard, number 1. Number 2, do not sum up too many classes so that it becomes hard for you to cope up with the ongoing classes, right? Number 3rd thing, you can directly call this, because we are applying object-oriented methodology and we are applying more professional methodology today, right? You can directly go, and without creating this accounts controller class, you can directly go into the register.jsp, right? Instead of calling this here, what you can do, you can create session, right? You can create session s is equal to db context dot connect. So now you can get connected to the db context and import the session right here, so which is the capital session, and it is this session coming from the Hibernate package. Import the package, and now you created an object of session, and instead of ac.save, you can directly call s.begin transaction, s.save, right, the object user, right, and you can say s.get transaction dot commit, right, and you can say that's it. You can just type these 3 lines. In order to save and map user object with the database column in using the Hibernate framework and doing object relational mapping, this is sufficient. But why have we done what we have done so far, right? Why have we created an accounts controller? Why are we doing this, right? And why are we calling this save function? Because it's not the only thing, right, that we have to do, right? So we have to actually think of many things, right? Because we have to validate the data and we have to do many things. That is why we created a separate controller here that is going to manage it. And we have created a separate connection file which is going to give us the live session. Every time we call session dbcontext.connect, we will be getting a live session and we can close it in the finally block as usual. Right, and this is what is happening here, that this is not the only thing we are doing. Register is not only saving, but first encapsulating valid, checking if the data is valid, right, and then saving it to the database and checking whether database has actually taken it or not. And this is you can clearly see this register. No, valid is going to validate, and yeah, this is the register function that's actually sending the database to the database by writing just 3 lines of code: begin transaction, save, and commit transaction, right? And this save is public because it's encapsulating is valid, first checking is valid and then checking is registered. So that's why we're calling only one function outside here, that is save, right? So this is the beginning of Hibernate, and this is the beginning of professional programming with the database persistences, inshallah. I wish you all the best. Practice this, complete what I show you, and be completely synchronous with me so that you can go ahead with this kind of a training, right? And do not sum up many classes. Practice, 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 and practice more. I wish you all the best and good luck for tomorrow's class. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Bye-bye. Take care.